Hi and welcome to GoGetterEnglish.es. Today we wanted to talk about a wonderful grammar point that we think will be very useful for you to use while speaking English, and those are our conditional sentences. Conditionals are extremely important in the English language because they help us express what may happen in the present and in the future. Conditionals serve many purposes and take several different forms. They can be used to give advice, they can help you express regret, and of course you can discuss facts, among other things, of course. Grammatically, the forms of all conditionals look very different, but they always have two clauses in common. A clause, as you might know already, is a piece of a sentence that contains a subject and a verb. In conditional sentences, there are two clauses. The if clause, the one that contains the if, that means the condition, and the main clause, which will usually express the result of that condition. So let's go ahead and take a look at these conditional sentences a little bit deeper. Let's go ahead. So let's go ahead with today's grammar training session, and as you know, we're going to be talking about conditional sentences. The first thing we want to talk to you about is the types of conditionals that you might find yourself using, or that might be interesting for you to actually make good use of. So we'll take a look at those types of conditionals because, as you know, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, conditional sentences are very useful when talking about regrets, when talking about facts. So we're going to take a look at the different types of conditionals, the different classification or categorization of conditional sentences. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we are able to identify which type of conditionals we might be using in the sample sentences we're going to show you a little bit later. So let's go ahead and take a look at our types of conditional sentences. The first type that we wanted to mention is the zero conditional. Now let's take a look at the example we have right over here. If I go out in the rain, I get wet. That means this condition happens 100% of the times, and that means that it's always true. So whenever this happens, we'll be talking about a fact. That means if I go out in the rain, I always get wet. And take a look that since it's a fact, we'll be using the present simple sentence in the if clause, in the conditional clause, and the present simple in the main clause as well. All right, so take a look at that. Just try to keep it in mind. Let's go ahead with the first conditional. Now here it starts getting a little more complicated. Take a look at the example. If I dress up well for the interview, I'll get the job. Take a look that the conditional sentence is a present fact. It's a condition based on the present. That means if I dress up well, I'll probably get the job. It's very likely that I'll get the job. So whenever we want to use the first conditional, it's because there's a high chance that something might happen in the future thanks to a condition in the present. There you go. So that's why you'll always see the present simple tense in the if clause, where you see the if, and the future tense will be used in the main clause as a result of the condition. So take a look at that. Our first conditional is always based on a present fact, on a present condition, and a future consequence. So let's go ahead and take a look at the second conditional. Now this one is super interesting. If I were taller, I would play in the NBA. Now it is obvious that I am not tall, and that's why I am making the condition, because if I were, I would play in the NBA. So whenever we want to talk about things that are not real in the present, that means I am not tall, we tend to use our second conditional sentence. If I were taller, I would play in the NBA. And take note that in this second conditional sentence, we're using the verb were, the verb to be, in were, as if it were plural. This is something that comes from, let's say, Old English, whenever we want to express a hypothesis. If I were taller, I would play in the NBA. You know the typical sentence, if I were you. It's something that happens in English just in this sentence where we have the first person and we are using the verb to be in the past as in were. All right? So if I were taller, I would play in the NBA. That means we are talking about unreal situations in the present. They're situations that are not true, and we make a condition about them. All right? Let's go ahead and move on to the third conditional. Take a look at this example again. If the Titanic had had more lifeboats, not so many lives would have been lost. Now, as you can see, we are talking about a past fact, something that happened in the past. And we're talking about something that is not true from the past, because the Titanic, unfortunately, didn't have as many lifeboats as necessary, as they needed to actually save more lives. So we are talking about something that is unreal from the past. And that's when we use our third conditional sentence, when we talk about something that is not true from the past. And take a look at the tenses that we use. We will be using the past perfect because it's the tense that actually shows us that something is really, really back in the past, and a conditional perfect tense, the would have plus past participle. All right, so try to remember these. The third conditional, all three conditionals are important. Let's take a look at this third condition. Let's go a little bit deeper into this third conditional sentence, because we're going to take a look at a third conditional sentence with an inversion. Again, of course, it actually helps us talk about unreal situations in the past. We make conditions about that, but we're going to be talking about them as an inversion. And the reason we're going to use an inversion is because it makes everything sound a little bit more formal, and it helps us emphasize whatever we want to express, our idea or our notion or the fact itself. So let's take a look at how we can invert these wonderful conditional sentences, especially the third one. Let's take a look at this example here. Had I seen the keys, I would have told you. Now take a look that we actually use the auxiliary verb from the past perfect tense, had, before the subject, just as it happens in any inversion that we use in English, as it happens in questions as well. Any inversion will always have that auxiliary verb first. That means it comes before the subject. So, had I seen the keys, I would have told you. Now, could I say, if I had seen the keys, I would have told you? Yes, of course you can use that sentence as well. But you know that whenever we use an inversion, everything sounds a little more formal, and it helps us emphasize that certain part of the sentence. So don't hesitate to use them. Well, let's go ahead and let's take a look at a few more samples, and let's see if you're able to identify which type of conditional we're using. All right? So let's go ahead with our practical exercise of the day. Take a look at these four sentences. Let's take a look directly at number one, and let's read it. If I were younger, I'd be able to play basketball better. Take a look at that. If I were younger, I'd be able to play basketball better. As you can see, this doesn't sound very true. Now, what we need to analyze is if it's the present we are talking about or the past. We know it's not true because I am not younger, unfortunately. So we just take a look at that condition that we're making. If I were younger. So I'm pretty sure we are talking about the present. However, it's not true. And you remember that it's the second conditional, the one that we use to talk about unreal presence. All right? If I were younger, I'd be able to play basketball better. Take a look. Our verb to be in the past in were, using the first person, and I'd be able to play our conditional tense. There you go. Let's take a look at the sample number 2. I'll go to the party if you come along. Now, take a look at that. I'll go to the party if you come along. In this case, we changed the if clause to come later, which is fine. Actually, we see it a little bit later. Can I say, if you come along, I'll go to the party? It's the same exact thing. So let's analyze our if clause. If you come along, it's a present simple tense. That means if we're using a present simple tense, there might be a future consequence. When does that happen? In the first conditional. The condition in the present is if you come along, and the future consequence is I'll go to the party. Let's take a look at the third example here. Had I been informed, I would have attended the meeting. Had I been informed, I would have attended the meeting. Take a look at that. I think it's very clear over here, right? We are talking about the third conditional in an inversion, right? We are talking about something that is not real because nobody informed me. I actually missed the memo. So take a look at the past perfect, inverted past perfect there. Had I been informed, and I would have attended our conditional perfect tense. So a perfect, a wonderful third conditional. And let's take a look at the last one here, our last sentence. If they had seen the movie, they would have spoiled the ending. If they had seen the movie, they would have spoiled the ending. I think it's again a very clear example of our third conditional, because if they had seen it, that means they haven't, they would have spoiled it. So whenever we use this past perfect over here, if they had seen the movie, we actually can guess that it's third conditional. We are talking about something that is unreal from the past. Well, we hope we've been able to help you in our wonderful conditionals lesson. And, well, stay tuned for more, because next week we'll be back with some more English grammar lessons from GoGetterEnglish.es. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.